Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dose of Desi. This is our 10th episode, and today is Sunday, June 19th. And believe it or not, we're only like 2 or 3 days away from the summer equinox, so the official start of summer. I can tell you the temperature already feels like it's summer outside, that's for sure. But yeah, once we hit that point, it'll, as many of you may know, the days start getting shorter. So I'm not looking forward to that, but here we are.
That's right. That's right. Although lately it actually wasn't too bad. Like today, the weather actually wasn't too bad, but I can feel it getting there. It's getting there for sure.
I mean, we've had a couple
But
hundred degree days though, right?
it's been close. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Anyway, go ahead.
Um, but what's up, everyone? It's as Udit said, it's our 10th episode, which is crazy. Can't believe it's been 10 episodes. It's been super fun so far with a lot of interesting topics and cool special guests as well. But tonight it's just the two of us, and we're going to be talking all about storytelling, from its importance to different mediums and styles in which stories are told, to what we envision as the future of storytelling. So a lot of interesting discussion ahead. But before we get started, make sure that you share your thoughts, comments, and questions in the chat box as well throughout the podcast. We always love hearing from all of you in the chat. So have at it.
Perfect. And also, just a heads up, I know I don't have my usual setup here. Um, I'm at my new house, so just trying to get used to that.
Yay!
Yeah, about time, right? So just getting used to that. But for the time being, I think next time around I might have a little bit better of a like setup. So, but let's get started with today's episode. As Hassan mentioned, it's just Hassan and I today, and the topic for the day that we have actually been wanting to talk about for a while is storytelling. Um, Essentially, storytelling in terms of personal storytelling, movie storytelling, like it's quite a broad topic, but we just want to have a discussion around it. So, one of the first questions that we want to ask and just discuss is, why are stories important? Why do humans tell stories? And why are people drawn to stories? Hassan, any thoughts on why the stories are important?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel like when you get down to it, stories are a way of connecting with others in a way, whether that's either sharing something that you've been through and sharing something maybe personal, or just coming up with a fictional story as well, and being able to like either entertain or send a message, or it's a way of communicating with people. And I think it's something that has always been around, just it's changed forms over the years and all sorts of different mediums. We'll talk about some of that too.
Mhm.
But I really feel like it's a way that people have been able to connect with each other, and communicate in interesting ways.
Mhm. And isn't it accurate that, like, I think I remember reading somewhere that stories have been told ever since language was like really invented or created, which makes sense. Even before then, like, I mean, everybody as human beings, we have different perspectives on different things. So I think it's a very human phenomena to want to share stories and our experiences with others, to give them a little piece of what we might have gone through to get to where we are, or vice
Yeah.
versa.
Well, I mean, like history wise, like you go back and look at like old drawings found in caves and things from way back when. Yeah, I mean that's a form of storytelling where people noted down or drew something that they wanted to etch in stone and share, and so that was a pretty early form of storytelling.
And
You know.
what's fascinating about that, actually? That particular sort of storytelling, not to say storytelling like a billion times over and over, but that particular type of storytelling, there's mystery to it. So like when you tell a story, usually, like, I don't know about you, but like when I watch a movie or watch, like, I start watching a TV show, it's like I want to binge watch all the episodes and like know the whole story. But I think part of the best thing about can't get my thoughts together here. Part of the best thing about stories is, or the best stories are created that have a little bit of mystery or like surprise to them, right? Like, I don't know, Stranger Things, for example. Like they always leave things at a cliffhanger, right? And in movies that go on like 3 or 4 or 5 iterations, that makes you want to know more of the story. So
I
that's
think
just,
that speaks to like it's like the human desire to like you want to know things. It's that curiosity, right? And so like if you have a story with a good like hook or air of mystery, it like gets people to like want to hear it and get involved. It's interesting.
it's like a psychological form of story crack, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah.
Get you hooked, and yeah, okay, what's next, but that's the thing. I feel like I listen to a lot of Alan Watts, actually. I don't know if anybody knows, if us and you know who that is, but he's like a British, like he was, like a British Taoist philosopher type, like speaker, lecturer, and he always says like, if life were predictable, or something along these lines, if life were predictable, how boring would it be if like you knew what was going to happen next? So it's great that we have these stories, no matter how unpredictable, that shake up our lives. But
Yeah.
anyway, um we do have a thing we found about the histories of stories, right, and the storytelling. Do you want to share something from that?
Yeah, I mean, so I that link. So it's from National Geographic. It's an encyclopedia entry on storytelling. And actually, let me see if I can maybe share my screen and pull it up here. Okay. So they talk about Homer's the Iliad.
And the Odyssey.
But yes. And so they're saying, oh, actually, they even mentioned some of the earliest evidence of stories comes from the cave drawings as
There you
well.
go.
The drawings date as far back as 30,000 years ago. Um, it's even possible that the scenes depicted on those cave walls were associated with some kind of oral storytelling, which obviously, oh, what just happened? Just like refreshed on me. But yeah, oral storytelling can take many different forms as well, which we can talk about. But that's certainly a pretty common way to tell stories.
Yeah, it says here stories can also let us see how, and I mentioned this earlier at the very beginning, stories can also let us see how others think and feel. In other words, they can allow us to empathize with the people around us. In fact, studies suggest that the more compelling the story, the more empathetic people become in real life. So fascinating psychological
Yeah,
type of stuff.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and then yeah, so let's move on to our next thing. What do you think besides what we already talked about? Did we discuss like why are people drawn to stories?
Um, I mean, I guess like I feel like if you want to share something with someone else, and I feel like people in general want to have a connection with others in some capacity, right? Like as a community, like you want to be able to at least connect with people in some way. I feel like by sharing something, sharing some type of a story, like that's one way that people can connect. So I feel like that's kind of what draws people to the idea of storytelling. It's just even at its basic form, when you're just talking to someone, like, if you're like, oh, hey, what'd you do this weekend? And like you just are sharing what you did. I mean, in a way that you're telling a story about what occurred and the experience you went through, and that's just in its most basic form. I feel like um, people want to be able to share in that way. You know,
Like the story you shared with me yesterday. I don't know if it's okay for me to share or not, but I was at
yeah,
Huston's
share.
house. Like, is it okay if I share? Like,
I don't know which story you're talking about.
it's when I was. I'll touch on it briefly, not to give too many details, and if you feel comfortable, let me know. Um, But I was at Hassan's house yesterday, since we're about 15 minutes from each other now, and I was playing with his son, and we sat down for his mom offered me a samosa. We sat down, and he pulls out this book, and basically,
Oh, yes, yes.
I thought that was a
Yeah,
great story. Are you okay talking about that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, and literally, another form of stories are books, right? So
Yeah.
actually, right, like back in sixth grade, we actually created these like kind of like legit looking books with like a hardcover and stuff, where we wrote about different things, told about our families, this and that. But there was a page that was like, 20 years from now, I will be doing, this and this, right? And I was 11 at the time. So 20 years from them being 31, I'm 32 now. So this is as of last year. What would I be doing? And it said, I'll be like a director making movies, which, to some extent, I guess you could say is YouTube, right? The content I do. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm doing some type of,
You're producing. Yeah.
filmmaking to some extent, right? Yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing was, my family, right? It said, what do you expect your family to be? And I said specifically, me, my wife, and one boy, which, as of last year, especially as well, was true. And yeah, I literally specified me, my wife, and one boy, and that's what I have, which is really interesting because it kind of shows like it's me sharing a story back in when I was 11 of like what I'm envisioning for the future. I'm kind of sharing kind of what my life is as is. It's like a a memory being transcribed into a written form and being preserved in some capacity, right? And now, many years later, you're revisiting that and seeing, what your experience is like, and it's so fascinating to see how things, progressed one way or another.
How much of
Um,
it came true? I'd say like it's highly accurate. Like, you know,
yeah,
so I don't know, having the foresight to like, I don't know, Hassan, maybe you're on to something. So I was joking around with Hassan yesterday that maybe he should write one now for the next 20 years and see see if that comes true too.
right. Well, in a way, like these types of podcasts and things are preserving. We didn't have that 20 years ago, but now our conversations or things are being preserved out there, and can always go back and revisit 20 years from now and see what we were thinking at this point in time as well, right? So it's like different forms of um, kind of sharing our experiences or sharing our stories, which is interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. Though I still have I don't know why, I still have a place in my heart for like old school type stuff, like postcards. I really enjoy sending postcards still and just writing an essay. Some people send a postcard and they write like two sentences on it and they're like, see you next week. Whereas I'm like, here's my essay on Albania and what I did in Albania. Like, that type of just like telling stories and making someone wait. Like, you're like, yeah, I sent you a postcard about my trip to Albania. Like, they're like, just tell me
Yeah,
now. They're like, no, I'm not gonna text it to you. You have to wait 2 weeks before you get it. Like that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, anyway, kind of went
yeah.
off on a tangent there, but so let's see. Yeah, the next the next thing I have written down actually is different mediums that stories can be told on or told by through print, verbal, music, metaverse, etc. So, we were just talking about postcards, we were talking about books and multimedia. Hassan, you got any thoughts on this metaverse thing that we got down here?
Um, yeah, I mean, so stories, right, can be told in so many different ways, and we've kind of like noted how you have the old sort of print, it's like, or etched in stone, like some kind of more hard coded sort of a type of a story. Now we have a more digital format in a way of how people can create content and share stories. And now we're heading into, as we've kind of talked about in a previous podcast a little bit, is the idea of the metaverse and some type of like a virtual world or environment that you can interact with others in. And it's a little vague and kind of hard to see, like, tell exactly how that's going to shape out. But one example of that, that I did kind of want to share a little, is like taking the concept of the video game Fortnite, for example, as a way of telling stories, and how For those that don't know, it's a battle royale style video game. 100 people land on an island, you fight to the finish, last person standing. So it's like a shooter game. You wouldn't think that there's much of a story there to it, but the way that they tell a story is that when you're in the game, you're playing, you're on this island, the environment around you, every few days, every week or so, there's little updates, little tweaks to things that happen, little, buildings get collapsed, or something gets, created. And there's little things that are told through the environment. Some of it is a little more upfront. They might have some cutscenes to watch, but a lot of it is they don't tell you these things. You just if you happen to be playing in this location, you look around and on the side of a building, there's a poster there. And it's like talking about something that's happening, and it might be teasing something that's going to happen later in the game or later in the story. It's like, it's almost like a living, breathing story that they're sort of telling. And you are finding out by playing the game and being in this world as you see the story sort of evolve. Which I personally just love that concept. I think it's a really cool thing because I've played for many years, and so I'm playing with my friends, and we'll see things pop up, and we're like, "What does that mean? What could it?" You start to theorize to the point you made earlier about like a mystery to it, right? It kind of gives that sense of mystery. You wonder what's going to happen next. So I don't know, how this concept can evolve even further with the metaverse, but I just thought that was an interesting like next evolution in the way that stories could be told. I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that as well.
I mean, you said it pretty well. I don't know if I can top that off in any way. Yeah, I mean, I guess like I said, I guess I'm a little bit more old school in that sense that, I'm still a little skeptical of this new form of storytelling. Um, but I think like attending a virtual concert, for example, that was one of the things that like you introduced me to. You're like, yeah, they're having a concert in Fortnite. You want to come? And I was like, sure. Sounds weird, but
Yeah.
all right.
Well, you
So
know what? Actually, it makes me think of, because you're talking about you prefer more old school, more like print, that sort of thing, and
yeah,
to some extent, the interesting thing about that is in general, once it's in print, like it's preserved, right? It's there. Whereas this digital metaverse type storytelling, like if you log into Fortnite now, the things that have happened years ago, like they're gone. Like you can't go back and experience that story again. You can watch other people talk about it or share videos of it, but you can never experience that again. So there is some, like obviously there's a good and bad of this type of storytelling where it's kind of more unique and fluid and interesting, but you also lose some of that if you weren't there, as well. So I guess to that point, that's one of the cons of this type of storytelling compared to the more traditional styles as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, actually that's true. But I don't know. I've heard it being said over and over. Once something's online, it's not going away, right? So like if you got like a bad meme of some chick like doing something crazy, it's gonna be there forever, So I don't know. In a way, the internet in a way has been described as an external nervous system that humanity is creating, like this like giant external hard drive to like you know cloud, you could say, that is holding all of our stories and all of our unique perspectives, whether they be selfie taking or filter you know photos or whatever. It could even be genuine things that people write on blogs and whatnot. So interesting to
Yeah.
see how where this will go and how this will evolve. But anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Well, so another form you reminded me of, because you mentioned like a digital concert, um, music in general, right? I think we kind of talked about this when we were sort of, planning
Taylor
out the
Swift.
podcast of the idea.
She tells all of her
Yeah.
stories on music.
I mean, that is true, right? That is true. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on like music as a form of storytelling?
Yeah, I would say depends, right? If it's more I mean, there's all sorts of stuff out there, but obviously, you know, in my head, I think there are like two different types of music: music with vocals and without vocals. With vocals, you can feel like verbally tell a story along with the music. Like I just mentioned Taylor Swift, you know, she talks about her heartbreaks and her loves and all this stuff. Then there's some parodies of music out there, like Weird Al, you know, he would make fun of all these songs telling whatever, you know, stupid stories or whatever. Um, versus there's the non-vocal music which you just hear and you feel that emotion. I would say that's a totally different type of story. That's more a story that's felt rather than heard. So that's my like 2 cents, just you know, from what I can think right now. But what are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree. I think like you said, the sort of instrumental music, it is story in its own way, right? Like when you listen to like the Inception soundtrack and that, you know, that song Time, right, kicks in, like it makes you feel a certain way just from listening to it. And it's cool how it's kind of like a universal language or a universal form of storytelling, right? Because there are no vocals, anybody across the world could listen to it and feel a certain type of way uh, from from the music, which I think is super cool. I
Yeah,
love when instrumental music tells a story. Um, that's why I was in band. I love, you know, that type of stuff as well. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I bet there is online on YouTube, you can find a video where like somebody edited out all the instrumental music from all these like dramatic scenes. And you know, if it's out there, try watching that. See how you feel with the music and without the music. I often feel that in a movie, not to admit that, you know, I cry to movies or whatever, because yeah, sometimes, you know, it gets to that point,
I do
whatever.
all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's it's often the music overlaid on top of the story being told or the emotion being, you know, conveyed through words. If it was just one or the other, I don't think I would probably feel that depth of emotion that I would feel, you know. So it's yeah, I think music does add in like a dimension to storytelling actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
especially when, you know, I love when you have certain composers or things that they create themes for certain characters. Or I take the example of, there was an episode of the Book of Boba Fett. So I guess slight spoilers if you're still behind and haven't seen the Book of Boba Fett. But the end of the Book of Boba Fett, I think that they say something along the lines of, "We might need some help" or something like that. Or and then in the music you hear the theme for the Mandalorian. They don't say anything, but in the music they play it. And I know I watched a bunch of reaction videos and stuff too. Everyone was freaking out when they heard it because they knew what it meant. And that to me was like the coolest form of storytelling, because they didn't have to say anything, they didn't have to show anything. It was just the musical cue, and everyone knew what that meant. And that's, you know, I think just a really cool way to tell a story.
and music also just gives me goosebumps sometimes, and you're like, whoa. Anyway, that's off topic.
Yeah,
But yeah, actually, never really thought of it that way. But yeah, this is interesting that we're discussing that. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, so did we already discuss what are some of our favorite mediums? I don't think we did. We kind of
I
touched
mean,
on it.
maybe we can like explicitly like kind of say what our preferences are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yours
um
is
you know,
Mandalorian.
well, I mean, I think like I would say um more along the lines of like, yeah, movies or shows or music, like kind of um that form of like visual or audio, you know, type of storytelling versus um like print media, I guess. Not that I don't, you know, like print media. I've read some books and that sort of thing, but I tend to prefer when I like visually see something or hear it, like it invokes more emotions within me or kind of connects with me a bit more personally
With print media?
compared to print media. So I would say like movie, TV, or
Okay,
like,
right.
or yeah, music, like that type of thing. Yeah.
I don't know
What
though.
about you?
Comic, you remember like growing up, comic books? That was a lot of fun for me, at least.
You know,
At
I
the
actually
time.
never really read many comic books growing up.
No.
But if I did, I'm sure. But see, that also, I guess. So yeah, actually, I didn't think about that in the sense of it's print media, but it's more visual. So I think I would prefer that. And I actually do read some comics now, so I would say I do prefer that to just straight text on a page, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I also I don't know. I'm kind of like in that sense. I feel like the good and bad is like, and this applies to anything really, but you have different artists that have different interpretations of things. And sometimes for me personally, some artists, I have a hard time kind of interpreting what they're drawing. And then it throws me off and it like, I can't connect to the story in some way. Cause I'm like, wait, what is happening here? Or like, I don't know. Um, that's just kind of the experience I've had, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I actually just recalled a comic that I used to read on trains in newspapers when I was living in India growing up. It was called Billu. It's like the weirdest name and it sounds like trash, but it was enjoyable at the time. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. I think I have an appreciation for old school stuff lately. I don't know why. Like there's something nostalgic about it. You can feel it in your hands, at least some of it. Um, I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess I appreciate a little bit of both. Like I'm watching, some of these new TV shows that are out there, Disney Plus type stuff that tells a good story. Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite, but I think I appreciate a mix of everything. There's and in within these various mediums, there's complete trash, and then there's like the real good stuff.
Right.
Um, I think in my what am I trying to say here? In my opinion, stories that drag on forever and ever and ever and ever, like don't hate me people right now, I'm just telling you, like some of the Marvel movies, although I really like Marvel, some of the stories are starting to, like, for me, get a little old because they become predictable, and that's, there's no sense of mystery in it. Or sure, you see character development, plot development and stuff, but it's about a superhero, it's about this and that and the other and how that's going to happen. Um
Yeah.
so every once in a while, I think there's a really good movie that comes out, like Spider-Man, for example. The newest Spider-Man, even though I was like going in thinking, okay, this is another movie, it like had a lot of surprises, and it made it very enjoyable. And I remember I watched it with Hassan and walked out thinking that was actually pretty good. Like, yeah, that's good stuff. Like, because they brought back the past, and that's something people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever could probably relate to. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't
So
know.
actually,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I was gonna say that kind of segues nicely into a topic we have about like different styles that stories can be told, about more like individual experiences or large connected universes. So do you have a preference, one way or another? Like, do you prefer going into like a movie or something and like they just go all out and then once you're out, you're done, but it's like a full experience, or these ongoing, type of narratives?
I think it varies. There are some large connected universes, first of all, right? Like what are we talking here? The only one I can think of is Marvel, right? Or there's Harry Potter, or there is, I don't know, what, a few here.
There's I mean, yeah, so obviously like Marvel is probably one of the bigger ones, but yeah, I
Right.
think any like franchise type um property, even like the Jurassic
Oh, yeah.
World stuff, now Avatar, is
Oh, yeah.
becoming a franchise, like, oh, yeah, I guess in that sense.
I think so. The question was, what do I prefer? Right.
Yeah, what style, I guess, do you tend to lean more towards?
I think I'm gonna go back to what I was saying earlier. If it gets too large, it starts losing its meaning for me. Like like Lord of the Rings, for example. They came out with three movies, and then they came out with The Hobbit, and everybody was disappointed because it's like, what the heck is this? Like, whereas Lord of the Rings was like, oh yes, this is magnifico. Like, you got the three movies, they tie in together, and there's a good story to be told there. So I think the Holy Grail lies somewhere in the middle. But with that said, there are some individual experiences or movies that are quite unique. One of the directors, and we've talked about this before, you and I, but one of the directors that I really find intriguing, because he brings new concepts to screen that not a lot of directors do, but Christopher Nolan, in the past couple of years, I think he's experimenting with some new things, which I'm not like super fan of yet, but um like the Batman that he brought, the Dark Knight, the Batman movies, like they by far will remain my favorite. Like the new Batman came out, and it was this, that, and the other, but you can't compare it to like the Batman Begins or like the Dark Knight Rises with Bane and everything. Like there's just so much oomph to it. Like there's this fight between dark and light, and it's just like deep and that kind of thing. So I think it's the way the story's told. And like, you remember back in the day, way back in the day when I was in like undergrad, college, they came out with the first Transformers movie.
Mm-hmm.
And initially it was exciting, and then they just kept expanding the universe, and it just became trash. And I was like, no, this is bad. So I think the value of a story, or the value of storytelling, lies in both mystery and a happy medium of like, let's not do this for money. Let's do this because it's a great ass story.
Know your limits, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Because like you don't want to overdo it, right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I think that totally makes sense. I think for me, I certainly see the value in both sides. I probably prefer more the large interconnected universes, because I feel like I can get more immersed in the world when there's like more content out there. There's more characters, more things that you get to meet and experience. And I love just kind of diving in and seeing all the little Easter eggs, how this thing connects to that. Like my brain likes to like create the puzzle, I guess, and and live in that world. So that's why I love like the Marvel universe and all these new like Star Wars show, different things like that, where they're kind of expanding. But I can also appreciate like the one-off, movies of like Inception is one of like my favorite movies ever. Just a really great story from start to finish, and you're left like you don't want any more. Like even though it was kind of on a bit of a cliffhanger, it's like you feel like the story was told. It is what it is, and it was great. I even take like Avatar from James Cameron. I know a lot of people tend to hate on it nowadays because it got so popular, 3D and all that. Yeah, that's kind of become the narrative I've seen online, of people like, oh, what a basic story, and the blue people, ha ha ha, why are they making more movies? Like it's just it's become like a thing now.
Initially people said Pocahontas, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get to some extent, but to me it's like, and when we talk about storytelling, right? Like I feel like part of the story, the part of the experience was when you see it in the theater in 3D and you're immersed in this world and the way that it's told. I feel like that's part of the story, right? Or that's part of the experience and how the story is conveyed. So I enjoy that, and I'm looking forward to the next movie as well. But yeah, I don't. So I can appreciate, I guess, both sides, but I do tend to prefer the large universes, because you can really just, I don't know, escape from reality a bit and just jump into a whole other world or something. Yeah.
I don't know, as long as it's not predictable, because I feel like so many stories that are being told these days. I would say that's one of the challenges of the film and multimedia industry nowadays, is it seems like they just rehash the same stories over and over, just in a different, character, or just in a different format. And that's why there's no like excitement to it, every once in a while. Did you watch Dune?
No, not yet.
I watched Dune, and I didn't know, way back when Dune was a remake, and they had a really like cheesy bad version of it from way back when, which actually, even though it's cheesy, it's kind of interesting. Um, like seeing that for me was like a different type of story, and I think that's a universe of its own. But I think they said it's only going to be like 3 or 4 films or something, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought there's two, but maybe there's more. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, at least a couple. But
Yeah.
yeah, currently, like, I watched that uh earlier this year, and I was like, yeah, I'm digging it. That was good. So
Nice.
yeah. um
That's cool.
let's
Excuse
see.
me. So I think so we've sort of talked about different styles that stories can be told, different experiences, um, the how tech has changed storytelling. And we touched on it a little bit with like the metaverse, but how has technology really modified, I guess, the way that stories are told, whether good or bad? Um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that question.
Technology,
Yeah.
I think, to a degree, history repeats itself, whether it's, you know technology is getting more complex, and it's making storytelling more complex as it, evolves. But I mean, imagine being, just for a second, right? Imagine being a caveman way back when, and somebody figured out how to etch a story onto the side of the wall. Man, that was a life changer, right? Like, wow, like there's a new form of entertainment, and here we are doing the same thing, just in a more complex manner, in a way. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I think. I know it's a strange way of thinking, but it puts everything in perspective for me. So, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do they say these days? That next up is like holographic technology, right? You got virtual reality, but um, caveman wall art was augmented reality back in the day, because it allowed you to escape from your survival mechanism for 10 seconds and look at a wall and be like, okay, wow, there's another story out there. I don't know. So in a way, sorry, that's not going like way deep off the deep end, but um, that's kind of what I think. But in terms of where technology is going, where storytelling is going, I think we're headed towards more interactive storytelling, right? Like, didn't Netflix have, what was that, Bird's View or Bird Eye, or something? What was it called? Where you
Um,
could pick, you could,
excuse me.
I forgot what it was called. Like something.
Yeah, no, no, I know what you mean. Although was that a choose your own adventure thing, or I know they did something choose your own adventure.
Yeah, wasn't it like
Um,
a horror thing where you like picked between like 2 or 3 possibilities, and the story went one way or the
yeah,
other way, or I forgot what it was called.
yeah.
Like, so
Which they used to have those types of things in books, and now it's like, oh, now it's created in film, right? That's because as technology has changed, but we used to have that concept in books, and now, it's just a new form of media, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah. So I think it's cool. It's becoming more interactive. My only concern with it, though, is storytelling. Although we've been raving about it and saying all the pros and awesome things about it, there's one other aspect of storytelling that's actually a little bit darker, and that is that people use that to escape reality sometimes, right? That can be a great thing when done in moderation, like any other drug or whatever. anything that's helpful or useful. But I think as time goes on, I mean, like video games, for example, right? Like people get addicted to video games, right? Because because their reality maybe sucks, or maybe it's not interesting or exciting enough, or maybe they'd rather be playing with their friends, So I think as technology evolves and as it makes stories more interactive, and you can be anybody in a virtual world, and you can make your own story, and even though the world around you is challenging you, and you might have great things, I think people lose sight of that sometimes, and then they just want to escape, and then it becomes addictive. And I think that's something that concerns me in terms of the evolution of technology and stories and all that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think the other factor with technology is I feel like as technology has changed over the years, I feel like it's made our connection to the rest of the world more easily accessible, right? Storytelling has become more global, so that when you share something, it can now be seen by a much larger audience because of how connected the world has become.
Right.
Which again is there's pros and cons to that as well. On the one hand, you can have folks that maybe are underrepresented in a certain way, or they can share their own personal story and have that spread and be more well known, and can kind of inform other people as well. But then also to that point of there's so much else out there that you can kind of get lost in that as well, and how people sort of deal with that, or how they can
It's like some
connect with the stories around them, right?
Yeah, it's like some stories are just not worth being told, and others are very much worth being told. So how do you differentiate, and with the advent of technology, everybody now suddenly has the capacity to tell their story to the whole world, right? And
Yeah,
that can be kind of like a curse in a way at times, right? Because you're just like, I don't give a crap about what you're doing, 24 hours in a day. Like, I don't want to know, like, whatever, I don't know, some dudes talking about, oh yeah, look at me, or some girls talking about like, oh look, I'm doing all this makeup and stuff. Okay, cool. It's, I just think it's a danger that we get enmeshed in other people's stories, and I would be a hypocrite if I said that I have never done that, because I definitely have lost myself in other things or other stories or people or whatever before. But I think that's a big danger that I see coming down the pipe. Like,
well, yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's like the concept of influencers and stuff on social media, right? Like people, they share what they want to share and put it out there, and then other people follow and maybe get lost in the glitz and the glamour of it all, and that can be unhealthy,
Little do they
for
know,
sure.
behind all the glitz and glamour, there's a giant turd waiting for them.
Right, right.
I'm just messing around. But yeah, I think like anything else, some stories need to be told, others don't. Differentiating what needs to be and what not, that's key. Finding the balance. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no. Yeah, I mean, I think that totally makes sense, because that kind of gets to like what we're talking about, how our own sort of personal lives, right? You kind of everybody has their own story, but as we start to share it in this more connected world, it becomes it can become something else, right? You sometimes can lose control of that narrative online or that sort of thing. So it's an interesting way of before it was like you write your autobiography and it's there and as a book and it is what it is, and now it's like all these tweets or Facebook posts or whatever, um, but things can be deleted or people can interpret things in different ways. I don't, like I don't know, things can. It's a different way of sharing a story sometimes. Uh,
I have a
and
question.
it's interesting. Yeah.
How permanent do you think stories should be? Like the story of Hassan Ahmed, like how long should it be preserved, and like how long should it be told? Like, it's like, how do you determine that, right? Like the ancient Egyptians, they're, we have to literally like dig to find, their story, and so many other civilizations before them and all that stuff. But like, what are your thoughts on the permanence of stories, or the impermanence, or how long?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always a value in having a story preserved in some fashion. Now, I think that's where the style that it's preserved obviously can vary. In some cases it's from telling people and then they sort of remember it and maybe pass it on to a next generation or that sort of thing. Now, obviously if it's simply verbal, then over time that can potentially get lost or things may get twisted or that sort of thing. But at least in its most basic form, it's there's always something that you can learn from others or some thing that, like, I would love to go back and find out what the stories of like my great grandparents or great great grandparents or all my ancestors. Like, I think it would just be interesting to know where people came from, the experiences they had, how that informed people to get to where they are. I think there's a lot that we could learn from all of that. But I don't necessarily think that we need like our entire lives like live streamed and documented for the whole world to to see, right? So there's a balance in that, and in the way that it should be shared, I guess. I'm always, I try my best to be, and obviously not everyone's perfect at it, and certainly I'm not. But when I share things via social media, when I tell my story via YouTube or Twitter, whatever, I try my best to be to in some ways it is a little bit of cherry picking certain things, right? Like, I'm not going to go out there like if my son has a a tantrum or something, I'm not going to like share that out for the world or whatever. I mean, obviously every kid does, right? But I don't want that preserved and out in the world for everyone to see. But I'll share, like a nice picture or something with him or that sort of thing. So in some ways it is kind of sharing a bit more of a positive story, but also it's not that I'm omitting things. Um, it's on the social media side of things, I share things a certain way, and then in other avenues, I would preserve things a different way, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it, though. It makes me question, right? Like, that's why, like, I know you said like you're not omitting things, but in a way you are, though, right? In a way we all do. Like, we want
Sure.
the best of our stories to be told. What is Facebook? Literally that. It's like literally
Yeah,
either like, oh
but
my God, look at me, and I'm, I'm living my best life, or like something shocking. Oh my God, look at what happened to me. Like, you know, um,
yeah, but to that point though, like, if it's something about myself, like, I would be more open to it. But I think the difference there is I wouldn't want to tell other people's stories, like Maheen's story or Idris's story, other people in a certain way, right? That's for them to tell their stories the way they, would want, I guess, right? So it's more like, for me myself personally, I mean, I'll share all sorts of things online, but I share it in the context of me, again, sharing my story and trying to maybe help others that have gone through similar things or that sort of. I've shared the challenges and struggles that I've had to overcome as well. But I do feel like in this age now, we do also have to be a little careful of what we share of other people, I guess, as well, because it's not always, you know, up to us to tell their stories, I guess.
it's fair enough. Oh man, that is a fine line for sure. It's like
Yeah,
sometimes you want to say something to defend someone, but then if you say something at all, and they get word of it, and they're like, well, why the heck did you say that? And like, why? And it's like, oh, but no, I was trying to defend you. I mean, that, misunderstandings and things like that. um I feel like that's happened sometimes with me. That's why I'm sharing that. But
Yeah.
hopefully, if
Yeah.
anybody's listening who might have misunderstanding with me, please forgive me. Anyway, um, so yeah, we already talked about what we think the future of storytelling will look like, didn't we? Holograms.
To some extent, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess holograms. I guess I don't know what else it's. I mean, whatever this metaverse, I guess, ends up being, or
You ever watch that
but
movie Ready Player One?
mhm.
Do you remember like how I vaguely remember it was basically like about a guy, like reality was a bore, and it was just like, yeah, everything was trashed, Earth was like suffering, and everybody just suddenly escaped into this virtual reality, and they were like, oh, there's a contest, and if you win, you're gonna win everything and whatever. And I don't know, it was like some prize at the end of it, and they like became,
Yeah,
everybody was like all about that. Um, Thoughts on that
yeah,
movie?
yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a good example of what people like, the commentary of like what could our future potentially look like if we keep heading down a certain path, or what that would be. Um, yeah, I mean, I hope we don't ever get to that point. I think the thing with any of this stuff is like there's always a fine line or a good balance that needs to be had in what we do, and I think that in that movie, it's everybody is just it's like you've just focused on completely taking yourself out of an existing reality and just immersing yourself completely into whatever this reality is. And you could say it's fictional, but to them, like, maybe that feels more real to them because of they spend more time in that than the physical world, I guess. But I feel like I think you know there's pros and cons. There's some nice things that can be had about the virtual reality and all that. You have people that potentially can't travel to places or are sick or whatever and can't experience things in different ways, and virtual reality allows them to experience stories and experience things in a way that they couldn't have done before.
Mhm.
Right, so there's a lot of cool ways of sharing stories through technology, but it's always a good balance that has to be had, a good fine line. I think Ready Player One is like, what happens when we get to one extreme, which I hope we don't get to. But
Okay.
yeah, what about you?
What was the question again? I
Like
don't
Ready Player One, like do you agree with that? With um, or
agree with it.
or do you agree with what I was saying about,
I
like,
do
I
agree
guess
with what
Ready
you
Player?
said. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's a fine line, basically, to sum it up. Um,
yeah,
I do want to mention another dark side of stories, and actually this ties into what we not want to talk about next, but when stories become corrupted, when people tell stories just for the sake of it, or when people tell stories to steer the course or steer people into different directions, whether that be for good or bad. I think we may be living in an age where that's more prominent more and more. So basically, like, the perception of how a perception of a story can be changed regardless of what reality is, right? um, Fake news, for example. I don't know. That's a very controversial topic. So before anybody says anything, I'm just talking
yeah.
about
Well, I think, right, it's
in
the
a general
concept of
sense.
like, how we can tell stories or tell things in a certain way, but like with anything, it's when a person tells a story, it's from their perspective or what they're saying, but is that true, is it not? And with the age of social media and technology and how information can be shared, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish. Like if you're up front in person with someone, right, it might be easier to gauge that. But if you're like in a whole other world and you're reading a tweet from someone or whatever, like, it becomes harder to judge what's real, what's not real. And right? It's like that perception of reality, and like trying to figure out what is the true story. And it's an interesting dilemma, I guess.
Yeah, and I think eventually we might have to just live with the fact that sometimes we just don't know what is a true story and what's not, and make the best decision based on that we can. But who am I, right? Just another dude talking on a live stream. Um, but I think I mean entire wars have been, you know, the perception of entire wars has been skewed in the past, whether, you know, not maybe skewed, but, you know, I heard, and again, I can't confirm or deny this, so nobody attack me, but you know, I remember vaguely hearing that or reading somewhere that Pearl Harbor initially, you know, uh, one of the Western countries, I think, like instigated, you know, and pissed off the Japanese so that they would attack Pearl Harbor, and then they attacked, and then, you know, we ended up going to World War after that. So I don't know if that's true or not. You know, then there's um, another ship called the Lusitania that I heard about. Again, you know, it's that was sunk, and that pissed people off, and that led to a war. You know, just little influences like this. So really, I think we live in an age where we really have to be mindful of, you know, what story are we being told. We really have to question things for ourselves and ask ourselves, okay, this story that I'm seeing, whether it's on the news, whether it's, you know, being told to you by another person that you may trust or not trust, having a logical, rational mind, an analytical mind of your own, and asking yourself, what do I think? At the end of the day, I think that's what we need more of. But, you know, that's what differentiates you from an individual versus like group think, right? Like, because I think it's easy to jump on a bandwagon and be like, oh yeah, the story that's being told, do I buy it or do I not buy it? So it's I don't know. I think using your own faculties and deciding, okay, you know, for yourself, doing your own research and having conversations like these. I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent or not here, but am I? You're
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I definitely get, like with storytelling, I think like it's a changing world where
it is a changing world, that's for sure.
it's a lot to navigate, right? It's we don't uh as technology changes, as stories are told in different, more fluid, changing ways, um, we have to adapt or figure out the best way to handle these different forms of how stories are coming at us, and what we um, choose to believe or follow, and what we don't,
Yeah,
um, and how we want to tell um, our own stories as well,
I mean,
going forward, right? It's
we could argue, you know, what is one of the like older stories that's told. There are, again, I don't, you know, not to get into specifics with this, but like religion, for example, right? There are a lot of religious stories in every culture and every religion that are told. Can anybody verify them? Not that I know of, but people believe them because they feel like they add value to their life or they improve, you know, this, that, and the other, right? It could be deeper reasons than that. Maybe it's tradition, maybe it's family, maybe it's whatever. But, you know, at the end of the day, is that a story or is that not a story? Who gets to decide? I don't know. You know, that's very controversial. So sorry I bring that up, but yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, there's a lot involved in storytelling for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if we have um, any other topics here. I'm looking in the chat as well. And Maheen popped in at one point. So hi, Maheen.
Oh, hi,
He's
Wayne.
putting his Reese to bed.
Oh, is she still
But
on or is she
no,
gone?
I think I think she was just in a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, we'd love to hear what everyone else thinks as well, just of storytelling, because I feel like this topic, um, in a way, like we're telling our stories through this podcast, and also hearing the stories of other people, right? As we've had special guests on here and getting to know their experiences, doing a deep dive into the way people think. And, I think it's another form of storytelling. So, hopefully y'all enjoy that as well. And I think we'll just continue to learn and grow, and use this forum for more interesting topics as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts to wrap things up, or?
Yeah, just that storytelling and stories are a tool. It just depends on who is using them, whether they're, if you have somebody who wants to be genuine and tell their story, then it could be used to inspire people. If you have somebody who wants to like use it for negative purposes or skew things, yeah, it's like a tool, like anything else, like a hammer or this or that. It's the story being told that sways us one way or another. So I'm a big fan of it. I think these conversations, like you all already said, podcasts and all that, I find a lot of inspiration, and even from movies, films, traveling, you really accumulate stories very quickly when traveling. I'll tell you that. So yeah, it's, go out and make your own story. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good way to end it there. Go make your own story. Well, thank you to everybody for joining as well. You can find us on Twitter at the Dose of Desi, and you can email us at thedoseofdesipod@gmail.com. So make sure you go and share your stories with us.
Perfect. And yeah, like Hassan already mentioned before, keep an eye on the social media for any polls or episode notifications. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.